I think this little journal turned out absolutely adorable, and you might be surprised by how I created it. The cover starts with simple 6x6 papers, but we're going to turn it into this adorable little coffee themed journal, complete with coffee stain pages, faux coffee stains, stamping, and splattered details. I'll take you through the entire process step by step so you can recreate the journal yourself and make it your own. So I've gone ahead and chosen 2 6x6 papers for my cover, and the papers that I'm using today are from the new release from the Not Too Shabby shop, and this is the Denim and Coffee release. It's an absolutely adorable release, and when I saw it, I thought it would make the cutest little journal. So I'm going to take the first 6x6 piece of paper, and I'm going to cut this one down to 5 inches wide. So it's going to measure 5 by 6. We're going to leave the height as 6. So this journal is going to measure 4 by 6. I'm then going to take the second sheet of paper that I chose for my journal cover, and I'm going to cut that one down to 4 inches. So this one will measure 4 by 6. So once I have those cut down, I'm going to take the 5-inch piece to my scoreboard. So this is the piece that measures 5 by 6. I want to put the 5-inch side to the top of my scoreboard, and I want to score at 4 inches. I am going to score it a couple of times because this is fairly thick paper, so I don't want it to crack when I fold it. So I'm just going to score it to get it ready for bending. And then I'm just going to fold that over, and that is just a little flap there we're going to have on the front. So then this will fit on the inside of this flap, but I really don't want that touching the score line. So it's not going to fold well if I do that. So I'm just going to trim off a little bit more. So this 4-inch piece that we cut, I'm going to go ahead and just trim it down to 3 7/8. So it's going to be 3 7/8 by 6. That way it will fit right inside this flap without touching my score line. And that way also the front cover and back cover will line up beautifully. So I think that looks really good. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the edge of my 4-inch piece, and then I'll add a little bit of glue to the flap. I'm going to add just a little bit to the top and bottom of this flap as well. I want to make sure that it sticks really well. Then what I'm going to do is take the cover piece, and I'm just going to line up all of the edges, the top, the bottom, and the side. I want to make sure all of my edges are lined up, and then I'll just fold the flap over. That way everything is straight and lined up, and it will look beautiful. So I'm just going to take my cloth here, and I'm just going to wipe off any of the glue that oozed out. And you can see here on the inside where I went barely inside the score line. So it's just a little bit of space there between the score line and the beginning of the cover. And I love the inside of this paper. It looks like denim. I love creating journals with denim fabric. So this was just perfect. So now I want to decorate the cover of my journal. So I'm just going to bring in another piece from that Denim and Coffee 6x6 paper pad. And I'm just going to trim this one down to fit on the cover. I'm going to cut mine down at 2 3/4, but you could cut any size. I'm just kind of eyeballing what I think will look good on my cover. And then I'm going to cut it down to 3 3/4 tall. But like I said, any size you want to frame out for your journal cover. Then I'm going to bring in my Tim Holtz tool, and I'm just going to kind of rough up the edges. Now you can do this with a pair of scissors, but I always end up cutting myself with the scissors when I do this. I am so clumsy. So for me, it's better to just use this tool. It's a lot safer for me. And this tool was fairly inexpensive. I've had it for several years. I always just forget to bring it out and do this to the edges. So today I brought it out, and I'm trying to use my tools more and kind of have this mindset, use it or lose it, because I have so many different things in my craft room that I need to start using them and not just have them sitting around. So this is one of the tools that I've pulled out this week that I'm using, and you'll see it in the upcoming weeks in different videos. I am filming ahead, so I'll have several of these videos using this Not Too Shabby release coming out this month. So you'll see that I use it again in those videos. It does make quite a mess, but it's a lot of fun to use. So here's a strip that was left over when I cut down the cover. So I think that would look really pretty on the cover. It's just flipping it over and it's got that denim look. And then I'll add this little rectangle here. And then I've picked out some of the ephemera pieces from the Denim and Coffee ephemera pack that's in this new release. I love this little mouse. I think he's absolutely adorable. All the flowers and just the different ephemera pieces just go together so cute. So I'm just going to layer all of this up on my cover. I think that looks really cute. And then I think I also need to add a sentiment. But first I want to go ahead and just glue some of this together, and then we will figure out which sentiment we want to add to the front. So I'm just going to add this strip to the front here. And when you're decorating the cover of one of these little journals, it's kind of like decorating a card. You can just kind of go with that idea as you decorate the cover. So if you want to create this along with me, but you want your cover to look different, by all means, just come up with a different design, just like you would decorate a card, just decorate your cover. So I just thought, as I was looking around my desk, I really wasn't sure what all I wanted to put on the cover, but when I saw this scrap, I knew that it would be absolutely adorable on the cover. And then I'm just going to add this rectangle here. Now I am trying to crinkle up the edges some. I want this journal to be a coffee journal. I want it to look like it's been cherished and loved. So I'm okay with this, but if you don't like the rough edges, if you don't like some of the things that I do today, by all means, just leave those off. You can still create this journal without all of those different little details that I add. So when I create my pages, I'm going to kind of give them a coffee look. So I'll show you how I do that, but you can skip that and just use the process that I use to create the journal. If you like everything to be more crisp and, you know, not so ragged, then by all means, you can do that as well. This is just an idea that I had of how I wanted to create this journal, and I just wanted to share it with you. So now I'm just going to layer up my ephemera pieces, and so I'm going to start out just by gluing these two together. I'm not going to glue them down yet. I'm going to leave them where I can move them around until I figure out which sentiment I want to put on here and where I want to put the sentiment. But I'm going to go ahead and glue these pieces together just to have myself a little cluster ready to go when I fix the cover, because I really like how this was looking, and I don't want to forget how I had it laid out. So you can see here, I'm not gluing it to the cover. I'm just gluing all the pieces together to make a little cluster. And so then here is a little, looks like a little coffee stain or the top of a coffee cup. I'm not really sure looking down into it. Maybe a little coffee splatter, and I'm just going to add that at the bottom. There, like I said, there are some cute little pieces in this. And I love that it's a combination of cute, but then you also have the flowers and you have the heart. You have, you know, the cute little animals, but then you also have this more serious things if you don't like the cutesy look. So then I'm going to bring in the Brewtiful stamp set. And this is a stamp set where you stamp all of the sentiments at one time. This is one of those that makes everything easier, I do believe. And I'm going to use the one and done die as well. So the one and done die came out before this release, but it is such a time saver. So I really love things like this that makes crafting easier. So I'm going to start out first by just stamping the sentiment. So I want these to have a coffee look. So I'm just stamping them out with Gather Twigs Distress ink. I think that's a pretty color for this journal. You'll see that I'm going to use it some more in it as well. So once I have these stamped, it's really easy to cut them out. And this is what I love about this stamp. And you will see in future videos coming up that I've been making this week how I use these sentiments. So you stamp all your sentiments at one time, and then you take the one and done die and you cut them all out at one time. So what I do is I just stamp them, cut them all out, and then whatever's left over, I'm going to put in the package with my stamps. And so throughout the week, I have been using them, and I've had to stamp them another time because I've used up quite a few of the sentiments. And so, but it's so easy. It's so easy to create all of these sentiments at one time. So if you're making a bunch of cards, I think this will be great too, because you got all of these sentiments. If you're making a set of cards, if you're following the Kendra's card challenge, then this would be great, because as you're making your cards, you can just grab one of these sentiments to add to your card. So here are all of the sentiments cut out. So now I will just add those. Once I figure out which sentiment I'm going to use, then I'll add the rest to the inside of my stamp set so I can have those to use for the rest of the week. And so they all come out so beautifully. I'm just going to pick out a few that I think I want to use today, and then I'll decide which one I like the best when I add it to the front. So I'm going to try out Take Life One Sip at a Time or Fueled by Faith in Coffee. I really like this Take Life One Sip at a Time. I think that's really good for this journal. And then this one looks good as well. I don't think I could go wrong with either one, but today I want to use the Take Life One Sip at a Time. I almost said Take Coffee One Sip at a Time, but I guess you do take coffee one sip at a time as well. But I'm going to use the Take Life One Sip at a Time, and I'm just going to glue that down flat on my cover. And actually I'm going to glue the Ephemera as well as the sentiment down flat, because I don't want that to catch on anything if I use this one in my purse. I think this little journal would be a perfect journal to put in your purse to take notes, but this is also a fun little journal that you could take with you, and if you're traveling, to keep notes about things, or even to make it your little travel journal. You could use this for so many things. I was thinking about it when I was making it, that this would be a cute little scripture journal as well, where you just copy scripture into it. You could paste pictures, you could paste ephemera, whatever, stickers, whatever you want to put. But I think that scripture writing is a good thing, because when you write anything down, you take it to memory. You kind of just record it in your mind. And so I really like the idea of scripture writing. So I thought this one would be great to copy down scripture in as well. But you could use it for whatever you want to use it for. So now I want to add some inside pockets, and I love this piece against this denim look. So I'm just going to cut down a strip that measures, I'm just trying to see here what size I want inside the cover, because you don't want it to touch the score line in your cover there, because it's going to bind it up, especially once we're going to add all the pages. You want to leave a little bit of gap so that you have room to sew your pages in. So I'm going to cut this strip down to 3 3/4, and then I'll cut 2 pockets down about 2 inches tall, maybe 2 1/4, and I'm going to add those to the front. And I think that you have a little bit of edge around the pocket. I think that'll be good. It'll give you room to add your journal in, so it gives you room for all your pages. So then I'm just going to bring in my circle punch, and I think I'll make a little thumb hole for the top of these pockets. And I'll just hold them both together so I can get that pocket so both of them looks even, or they'll actually be the same. So if I get it crooked, they're both going to be crooked, so that might be a mistake. But I'm just going to line it up the best I can from side to side. I just eyeball it. I don't worry about any measurements. And I think that turned out just fine. So now I'm just going to glue these pockets down. So like any pockets, you're just going to glue on 3 sides and then attach them to your cover. Now, I do try to put a very thin line of glue. Since these pockets are so small, I just want to make sure that I don't have a lot of glue, because you got to keep in mind, as much glue as you put down, it's going to shrink your pocket. So you want to put just a little bit of glue so that you have more room in that pocket. But you do want your pocket to be held down, so just add a thin line of glue around all of the 3 edges. And then I'm just centering it up from side to side. That way it doesn't get in the way of me putting my journal in. And I'm leaving a little bit of the blue denim around the entire pocket. So there we go. And you can see it's a bigger gap on the center rather than the sides, but you're not going to see that once you add your journal in. I did that on purpose to make room for my journal. I tend to add a lot of pages to my journal, so I want to be sure that I have room. I like little chunky journals, but I want to make sure I got room for the journal pages and I don't sew into my pockets. Okay, so now it's time to gather the pages. So I just went around my craft room, gathering all the different papers that I have to put in journals. And I'm trying to choose things that will look vintage or coffee stained or old to go in here. So I went more with the cream colored pages versus the white pages, but you can do whatever you want. White would go with this one as well, because there's white in the background of the cover, so that would look fine. It's just the look I wanted to go for, because it was a coffee theme. I kind of wanted to stay with that theme, and you'll see as I decorate these pages, why I went with the cream color. So now I'm just cutting my pages down to fit inside my journal. So I'm cutting them down to 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. I like to leave about 1/4 of an inch around the entire page, so inside the cover. So the cover measures 4 by 6, so I just go 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. You can do yours smaller. If you don't mind your pages hanging out, you can do them larger, but that's how I did mine. So then I have some music sheets that I'm going to cut down. So you'll see that not all of my pages are going to measure 3 3/4 by 5 3/4. I like to mix up the sizes, so I will cut some down to 3 3/4 by 5 3/4, but then some of my pages will actually be smaller. And I like having a journal where your pages are all different sizes. Now, if you don't, then cut all of yours the exact same size and have it, be the perfect size. But for me, I want these ragged edges. I want the worn look. So however you want yours. So when I cut this one down, you can see that one of the pages was the perfect size. But then the next part of the paper, I didn't want to waste it. It's just a little smaller, so I'm going to use it. I'm just going to use the whole sheet. I'm just going to cut it down. So what I'll do is just, like I said, cut one down the right size and the other one will be smaller. And then I found this recipe piece of paper in my drawer. And so I thought this would be perfect because it said ginger cookies. And I was like, that sounds really good with coffee. So I'm just going to add it. It's going to be a little bit shorter than it needs to be, but I think that'll be cute in there as well. And so that was kind of the idea when I was gathering papers. I wanted them to look worn. I wanted to think about coffee. So this is a actual coffee stain paper that I stained myself. So what I like to do is just get a big stack of paper and coffee stain it all at once. So I did this months ago, and I think I did it actually last fall. I did a bunch. I do up a bunch so I don't need to do the coffee staining, but a couple of times a year. So it just depends on how many journals I'm making. So you can see I cut this one down. One of the sheets is 5 3/4 by 3 3/4. Actually, when I say that, you want to fold it. So I like to fold mine and then cut the measurements. So folded is going to measure 5 3/4 by 3 3/4 because it's 3 3/4 wide. So I don't worry about adding all that up to make a whole wide sheet. I just fold mine and then cut them because it's just easier that way. And you just have a little bit of strips left over anyway when you're doing that. So this paper is just some paper that kind of looked coffee stained, but it's not. It just came like this. So I'm just doing a mixture of papers. And what I was saying was when I was going through my craft room, I try to think of things that would look good in a coffee journal. So that recipe paper made me think of, cookies and coffee. And then the music paper, I love adding music paper to my journal. But if you just want plain paper in your journal, just add plain paper. If you just want notebook paper, add notebook paper. Whatever makes you happy. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. Now, I did pull out a guest check as well that I might use. And then I have these little envelopes that I just have a stack of that I use for journals. So I'm just making sure that's going to fit in there. I just measure it and it doesn't need any cutting down to fit. And I'm going to pull in this little envelope here. It will fit as well. I'm just making sure that it's going to fit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start working on my papers. So now I want to add a bit more to these papers to just grunge them up. I kind of wanted to use this coffee filter, but when I folded it, it's just too tall, and I thought it would look kind of weird if I cut it down. So I finally didn't use it because it is too tall for the journal. So now I'm just going to bring out my gathered twigs and any of the other brown inks I have. I have, ground espresso and different ones from the Tim Holtz ink line, and I'm just going to use those to play around and create some coffee stained papers. So I have brought out my blending tool to add a little ink to the edges of some of my papers. I'm not going to ink all of the papers. I'm just going to go through and do a few things, especially to this stark white. So this is the only envelope I could find that as I was digging, and it is a stark white, so we've got to grunge it up a little bit. It's got to look like it's been around a lot of coffee. So I'm just going to start out by just adding a little bit of ink to the edges. Now, I'm not ink blending to have a smooth look. Once again, I'm trying to make it grungy. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in this jar that I have, and I'm just going to stamp it on my ink pad. Then I'm covering my ink pad back up, as you can see, because I'm going to bring out my spray bottle, and I'm just going to spray the edge there that I got the ink on. And you can see it makes it look like, kind of like a coffee cup was sat down onto my envelope. And I kind of like that look. And then I'm just going to put them random places. And you can see I only stamped one time, and there's a lot left on there. Because you don't want it to be perfect stamping. We're not trying to get a perfect look. We're trying to look like somebody set their coffee cup down. So just use all the ink on it. Now, if you do decide to stamp back into your ink pad, I recommend that you wipe it off because you don't want to get water in your ink pad. So now here is that envelope that I'm going to fold in half and use. And so I do want to kind of grunge it up a little as well with the, I think this is Gathered Twigs, but use any of the browns that you have. Any brown ink will work. And in order to get this coffee look, you're going to have a water-based ink. So what that means is it will react to water. So a water reactive ink, I guess I should say, not water-based. But you want a water reactive ink to do this. So then this is just an old glue stick that I have. And I am using it to make smaller circles onto my envelope as well. Of course, a coffee cup wouldn't be this small, but I really like the look of it. So that's why I just went around looking for different circles in my craft room that I could stamp with. So some of them you'll see that I just get the ink on it and then stamp it. And others I'm going to add water to the bottom of the whatever I'm using to stamp. And then I'm going to add the water to the actual envelope. And you can see how that smears just like, you know, if you were to spill coffee on your paper, how it just kind of runs, or you spill any liquid. So I am stamping those and then spraying those. So there's different ways that you can do this. So just play with it. Have fun with this. That's what I decided to do, is just sit down and have a little fun and just play and see what I could create, because it's just paper. If you mess it up, then you can cover it up or trash it, whatever. Don't worry about it. So that's what I'm going to do, is I'm just going to go through and add some more circles and coffee stains to these papers, just using my ink and the jar and the glue stick. That's the two sizes that I'm going to use. And then I'm also going to come in with this stamp from the Not Too Shabby shop. And this is an older stamp, but I did look, it was in stock when I'm making this video, so I will link below to it. I really love these flowers. So I'm just going to stamp up this page with the butterflies from the stamp set as well as the flowers, just adding different things to this journal. So this one, I'm just going to stamp randomly around my page. And I'm using the brown again just to have that coffee look. And I love how those flowers look in this brown ink. So I'm just going to look at this one and stamp it up, and I'm just going to fill this page up with stamping. I am going to bring in this little butterfly here to add. I have to add, you know me, I've got to add butterflies to anything that I do. I absolutely love butterflies, so I felt like this journal had to have a butterfly somewhere in it. It wouldn't be me if it didn't. So I decided to continue the stamping around of the flowers to just frame out the page, and then still leave the inside of the page here so that you can journal or add a photo. So here is the completed one. It is kind of full, but I like it. I like how it looks. You want to have a variety of pages in your journal. So this one will be quite different from any of the rest. I'm not going to do this to any of the other pages because I think it is a little busy, but I thought it would be pretty to add. So there is that page. So I'm just now putting all of my pages together, and this is just where you just play around and decide which pages go where in your journal. So I'm just going to put all of my sheets together, and even though they are not the same height, you can decide, do you want to put some down towards the bottom, some towards the top of the shorter pages, or do you want them to be in the center of your book? Wherever you want them. You just have to keep that in mind when you are sewing it in. If you've got them in some spots, you got to make sure that you do attach all of them. So once I get these the way I like it, then I'm going to go ahead and paper clip them together. And I'll just add a paper clip to them. But while I was paper clipping it, I realized that this yellow envelope needs something on the inside of it. So I'm going to come back and add a few more coffee stains to it. And then I've got to thinking, what if the coffee was splattered onto some of the pages. So now I'm just going to take my old little stamping block here. I am going to put a little bit of the ink down, add some water to it, bring out a paintbrush, and start splattering my pages. And when I get to splattering, I'll get a little carried away. So I decided, why not splatter more than just this page? So I am going to go through and add splatters to all of the pages as well. I think that that just really kind of makes all of the pages in the book cohesive and go together really well. So I'm just going to pull my paper clips off, and I'm just going to go wild with the splattering. I'm going to splatter front and back of all of the pages. I think that that just, for some reason, just pulls it all together. Now, some pages will have more splatters while some pages will have less. It's just a variety. I don't want to overdo it where you can't write on the pages and read, but it's just going to be in the background. Once this dries, it'll just be in the background of the pages. So I'm even going to do my music sheets. I'm going to do my, I'll do my recipe sheets, everything. I want everything to be a bit grungy and a little bit coffee splattered. Now do wipe off your block once you've added the water. If you run out of splatters and you need to come back with the ink, just wipe your block off so you don't get water in your ink pad, and then start all over. And you can see here, that's what I did. And this time I've got even bigger splatters. So I've got a variety of splatters throughout this book. So once I have everything splattered like I want it, I'm going to put my book back together because I tore it apart. And I'm just going to make sure all of my pages line up the way I want them. And then I will just bring in the paper clips, and I'm just going to clip them together so that they're ready for sewing. And you can see here I left the edge of that notepad piece of paper that I had. I love that edge sticking out like that. That goes with the rustic look and the vintage look that I want. So I'm going to leave that. And then I will just clip, I'll just open it up to the center, and I'm just going to put a paper clip at the top and then one at the bottom. And that should hold it together enough for us to sew this journal in, especially since it's just a small little journal. And then it'll fit right there inside. And there is some little pieces you can see hanging out the front of my journal. I'm absolutely fine with that. I love that ragged look. So now I'm going to bring in, I just have some larger needles here. I think they were for needlepoint. And then this is some, this is just some thread. I think you use this in small crochet. I'm not really sure. I bought it in the crochet section at Walmart. So then I'm just going to bring in my awl, and I don't measure, I just eyeball the center. So then I'm just going to take my awl and I'm just going to make a hole in the center of my journal. Make sure your fingers are out of the way because this awl is a little sharp. And I am trying to make sure that when my awl comes through, it's coming through right there on the fold line that the crease line that we made when we scored it. That's where I want my awl to come out at. Then I'm coming down about 1 inch below the top. And that's because of that envelope, because it's shorter. So I want to make sure I get a hold of that. And then I'm going to go about 1 inch from the top here as well. And then I'm just going to make 3 holes. So really, you don't have to know how to sew a journal together. I know a lot of people get nervous about sewing, but it's not really sewing. So I'm just going to measure out my thread here about 4 times the length of my spine of my journal to be sure I have plenty of thread. But like I was saying, it's not that hard. It's just kind of weaving in and out. It's not that difficult. Don't stress the sewing part of it. You know, don't think, well, I can't sew, so I can't do this, because you really don't have to have any sewing skills to sew this journal together. So I'm just going to take, and I'm using the larger needles just because I'm using the larger thread. So I like using the larger thread for my journal. It is a little harder for me to thread the needles nowadays, but it'll take me just a second and then I'll get it threaded. So once I have it threaded, I'm not even going to put a knot in the bottom. So I'm going to start on the outside of my journal, and I'm going to start at the center hole. And I'm just going to put my needle through that hole. Now you do want to be careful that you don't make any extra holes on your journal pages, but just go through the hole that you've made. And you're going to leave a little bit of tail of thread there on the outside. I'll leave quite a long piece because we got to tie this up when we get done. So then I'm just going to go down. So I started at the center, so now I'm going to go down to the bottom hole, or you could go to the top, either way, but I'm going down to the bottom hole, and I'm just going to come through that hole It's almost like weaving in and out. It's so simple. And then I'm just going to pull that down. Make sure your tail stays hanging out there. Then I'm going to come over to the top hole, and this is on the outside of your journal. I'm going to go through that top hole. It does take a second because you want to make sure you hit the hole and don't make any extra holes in your page. So if you have trouble like that, just go back through the center there, poke the hole again, and then it'll go right through. So then I'm just going to pull it through that top hole. And then I'm going to go back down to the center hole, and I'm going to come back through the center hole. It's that easy. So it's not really sewing. I know that a lot of people stress the sewing together of a journal, but this type of sewing of a journal is super simple. Now, when you come out this hole, you want to make sure you don't split the threads. You don't want to go through your threads. You just want to come through the hole. And then I'm just going to pull this through. I want to have one tail of the thread on one side. So you have a thread going down the center of your journal spine. You want to have one thread going on each side of that piece of thread so that we can tie a knot over top of it, if that makes sense. Now I am pulling it tighter. You can see trying to tighten up my threads, but don't pull so tight. Remember, this is paper. You could rip it. So you just want to get those snug in there so they're not flapping and loose. And then we're just going to simply tie a knot just like you would anything else. So I tie a couple of knots in my thread. And then I'm just going to tie a little bow. So you could just snip it off here and have just little strings hanging. But I want to tie a little bow on the outside. I'm just using that bow as another little design on the outside of my journal. Now, once I get that bow, I am going to tie that bow one more time just to have a knot in it. Once I get the bow like I like it, it takes me a couple of times to get the bow the way I like it. And then I'll just tie the bow over itself so that it's knotted so it doesn't come loose. You can see here I take the two little loops and I just tie them together so that it's knotted and they stay nice and tight. And there we have our journal put together. If you remember that yellow envelope that we put in the center, it's closed at the bottom, but it has a flap at the top. Since it's two different pages, one of the pages is a closed up envelope. So we are going to have to trim the edges of that. So I'm going to come through and trim it with some of my scissors that have a little shape on them. They look kind of like the edge of a stamp. So I'm going to cut it with that, and then I'm going to bring back my little tool that roughs up the edges. I'm going to rough it up, and then I'm going to just ink it a little bit. So once I do that, I am going to decorate my journal. So I'm just going to come through with some of the ephemera pieces and some of the sentiments, and I'm just going to add those to the pockets, and I'm also going to add those to some of the pages. I'm also going to create a couple of belly bands for the inside, so I will show you that as well. But I'm just going to play a little music and let you see how I finish decorating this journal, and then I'll come back and we'll finish, and I'll show you the finished journal. So here is our finished journal. I did add a few decorations to the journal and a few little tuck spots. And then I left a lot of the pages plain so that as I'm using the journal, I can add more of the ephemera to decorate the pages. Or if I give this away, I might add a few little pieces of ephemera into the pocket so that whoever has the journal could decorate it up. So whichever way, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with this journal yet. I haven't decided. I had a lot of fun creating it. Well, I hope today's video inspired you to create something. I will link below to all of the products that I used. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.